Welcome, everyone. We'd love to have you on camera if you're able to. This is the second session in the Social Impact Learning Series, and we have a fantastic panel today to give some of their opportunities for harnessing engagement opportunities. We would love for all of you to feel welcome to put in the chat. In the chat, we love to introduce ourselves and who you are. Again, don't forget to rename yourself. Apologies there, but who you are, your organization, and then also if you want to share LinkedIn or what have you, that's great, and where you're calling in from. Later on, we're going to ask you from your favorite engagement activities. So keep that in mind for your classrooms, because we do want this to be very interactive. As we get started today, we are just thrilled to bring in all these wonderful speakers, because it's just been wonderful to get to know. A couple of them are new folks that I haven't met before. So it's really wonderful to get to know our speakers today. Again, in the chat, if you guys can put in your name and organization and where you're logging in from, I'd love to see the chat start populating here. So, and I should put mine in there. If anybody can model that, that would be great. So share who you are and where you're calling in from. Thank you, Stephanie. And don't forget, if you're listed as Debbie Brock, because you clicked on the calendar invite, please do change your name. There's a whole lot of Debbies here, so my apologies there. And for our speakers today, and you can just do a little hand wave there, I want to introduce each one of them. Rosemary, if you've met her, she's at Strathmore University in Kenya. She's the director of the African Media Hub at Strathmore University, and she's really passionate about the work that we're doing. She obviously has this passion for journalism and writing and media with the young people, but she wants to use media and information to revolutionize how we shape the narrative of Africa into a positive light. She's been involved with Catalyst for a long time, and we're thrilled to have her here today. Denise Crossan from Swarthmore College. If you know her, she's our social business model canvas woman, and she's a huge fan of us. So Denise has been around for a while within Catalyst, I think actually really early on. And I absolutely love using her social business model canvas. It has been such a delight to learn from her and learn how I can integrate the canvas into my classroom. She's from Ireland, so when you hear the accent, you'll know where that is. And she really enjoys this work, working with social entrepreneurs from around the world. So we welcome you and to join us, Denise, and we're thrilled that you're able to do this while you're on vacation in France. So, and if you don't know her, she did some peace and reconciliation work in Ireland, which is some interesting stories there you'll hear a little bit about as well. Tina Lee Odeski-Zek, she was at Zagreb School of Economics and Management, and she does consulting work now. She loves working and mentoring with students. If you've done the startup weekend, it's super fun, Impact Hub, etc. And she, as looking at doing coaching, I'm actually excited because I'm like, I need a coach here. So in her work, when she was at the Center for our Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Zagreb School of Economics and Management, she really did some cool things there, and that's how I met her at some of the Shoka U events and some other events in the day. And then lastly, Michael Pearson from Fordham University. He's involved with the humanistic leadership. He's passionate about this. And we looked at opportunities to get in new perspectives from what we had seen before. And what we realized was the inner work that needs to happen for young people is an important step in our work with teaching and education. So I think looking at the humanistic leadership tools and resources is going to be a great opportunity for all of us to hear about. He's the chair of the leading people and organizations at the Gabelli School of Business, and he has this huge history. Founder and president of the International Humanistic Management Association. He's editor-in-chief of the Humanistic Management Journal, and he founded the Humanistic Management Network. And my fun fact is he's on vacation with his kids, And he is loving the fact that he's not looking as sweet with the suit on that he's going to show you a slide in a moment. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Again, please do change your name so you're not Debbie Brock anymore. If we can go ahead and pull up the slides, and Tina is going to welcome us as well as the moderator.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Debbie, and it's great to be here with this wonderful and diverse panel. So we're going to start it off, and we're going to have Debbie go first. So first, a little bit about, I think Karen's on the slide, so we'll know when we're queued up. We've taken some notes. You can take some notes as well. Please keep the chat alive. And we can introduce yourselves if you haven't already done that. So you can see our lovely agenda, and what our goal is today is to give you a great deal of takeaways for you to use in the fall. So Denise, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for allowing me the opportunity to talk about my social business model canvas. So as Debbie said, my name is Denise Crossan. I currently teach at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania and also for the Keller Center in Princeton University. I am originally from Northern Ireland. I grew up there. My formative years of education were there. And my day-to-day experience was as a teenager growing up in Northern Ireland during the conflict, and that really impacted and developed my thinking around community engagement, student learning, student engagement, student and social entrepreneurship. So that's my background. I'm hosted in Swarthmore by Peace and Reconciliation, the Department for Peace and Reconciliation Studies, as well as the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. But you can go to the next slide. This is just a representation of what my life was like growing up. Obviously, navigating a place that was in constant conflict and transition. Disagreements, civil discourse played a huge part in rebuilding the community after the conflict in Northern Ireland. And, this constant strive towards civil rights was a thread through all of the work that we did. I was one of the first community business advisors in Northern Ireland when the peace program began in 1996. Technically, we had an agreement in 1998. And I've worked with community organizations who have used community economic development to end war since then. So that's been a huge part of the work that I've been doing. So most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with Strategizer's version of a business model canvas. It's essentially the model of 9 boxes that lays out all of the key elements that an organization should think about if they're either developing a new business or reimagining the business that they currently have. And it, of course, focuses on the customers and then their value proposition, the product or service that they're offering, how they channel their product or service to the market, build relationships, and then organize the business essentially to make sure that they maximize profit and reduce costs. So like I said, all of the elements that you need to consider. And for years, I had taught the business model canvas in schools and also adapted it for my students that were interested in social entrepreneurship. And that's fine. There are many different versions and models of a business model canvas with some adaptations for social enterprise. But what I felt was, because of my experience working with community organizations on the ground to create social enterprise, it really didn't represent what my experience was in the field easily. And so, if we look at the range of types of different social enterprises that exist, we can see that there isn't really one fit model for all of this. We have to have something that can adapt, whether the organization leans more towards the charitable end of the socioeconomic continuum that you see here, or whether they're actually a little bit more closely aligned to commercial businesses or traditional business that are very entrepreneurial, but yet overall, all of them still driven by their social mission. And, necessity being the mother of invention, when the pandemic happened in the spring of 2020, and I knew looking ahead that I was going to have to teach a class on the social business model canvas in the fall. I got over the initial panic of how am I going to do this when usually I would be in front of the class with, printed out handouts of this business model canvas. it occurred to me that I really needed to be able to do this online, and it forced me, as all good inventions do, to turn to the online tools that we had at our disposal. So within one Friday afternoon, took me about 3 hours, I learned how to use Mural, I learned how to use Zoom, and I also decided finally, after teaching it for 20 years, to construct my own version of the social business model canvas that I felt better represented the elements that I thought were important. If you just go back to the last slide there quickly, you can see with the business model canvas, you tend to have just the slide that has the highlights, actually, Karen, that would be great. So in the business model canvas, you have the 9 boxes that I discussed earlier. In the social business model canvas, the predominant differences are we ask students to do a lot of pre-work ahead of time. So they have to consider the wicked problem that they're attempting to create interventions for. They will do that either through systems thinking working or design thinking or whatever approach they feel is appropriate to get the right information about what the current context is of the problem. And then the stakeholder box is subdivided into 3 particular sections. So we really focus on them understanding their beneficiaries, who will benefit from the social programs, social aspects of what they're delivering within their organization, and then customers, and then a subsequent very important group of stakeholders that's often ignored in other business model canvases is the funders, right? Often the people who have a lot of say in how the organization operates. And then there are a couple of other interesting sort of nuanced differences that allow them to really focus on that this is a social enterprise, such as how they measure their impact, what their social mission statement is, what their intentions are with their revenue. If they make a surplus profit, what do they intend to do with that surplus? How do they redistribute it, etc. So that's sort of the key elements on the differences in comparison between the social business model canvas and the strategizer's business model canvas. Now, this is a picture of the business model canvas itself. And I know that if someone could put the link to the Mural version, you can actually log in straight on because it's a bit difficult to see on this slide. Essentially, let me walk you through what this looks like. So on the left-hand side, you have a column that just gives some really good instructions to the person who's running the session about how long it'll take, the degree of experience that the person might need, and then sort of a step-by-step way to approach this. Do your pre-work first, get them to do the systems thinking or the impact gap analysis work. And then, if you're doing the social business model canvas for the first time, ideally you want to follow the numbers in sequence. So we go immediately first to the point of view and then identifying who your stakeholders are, your beneficiaries, customers, funders. Then write your social mission statement in less than 8 words, focusing on, what is the change that you want to see in the world and who are you trying to serve? And then go to the social value proposition, the channel to market, building relationships, and then over to the left-hand side, similarly like the business model canvas, where you describe the key partners that you'll have, the key resources that you'll need, the activities, what's happening in the macro environment, who are your competitors or your co-opetition. This is a term that we use quite a bit. If you're not familiar, it basically describes organizations that even within the nonprofit sector, you may be in competition with, but for this business opportunity, you might be able to collaborate with, thus cooperation, co-opetition. And then similarly with the other, writing what your social measurement strategy will be. What do you intend to measure? What are the indices that are out there that will best represent your ability to achieve your social mission? I usually cite the example of, a social mission, get Burmese farmers out of poverty, right? And how do we know whether they're out of poverty or not? We know whether we can measure whether their costs have decreased and their income has increased. And so those become really important impact measurement indices for students. I ask the students to do a lot of research around, are there peer-reviewed indices out there already that describe and help you measure the change that you want to see. So in our conversation later, I could perhaps discuss a little bit more about what that looks like in real terms. Then, of course, you hit the bottom line, which is essentially, describing your costs in relation to the social programs that you want to deliver for your beneficiaries, but also the costs associated with establishing and running your social business. and also then including costs involved in fundraising, for example, which is quite different in this scenario. And then your income opportunities, how much money will you receive from sponsorships, from grants, from public sector partnerships, and also then from tradable income from your business. So, all of these things are much more elaborate in social business model canvas than they would be within the business model canvas. And then that very important box in the middle, which is talking about surplus. What do you intend to do if you make an additional income with your organization? Do you reinvest it back into your social programs? Do you donate it to another organization that is similarly aligned with your social mission? Or what are your intentions? So the social business model canvas, like I said, similar to the business model canvas, allows you to walk through all of the elements to teach students what it takes to be able to make good decisions about how to run a social enterprise. It can be used if you're looking just at a social innovation also. With the social innovation opportunity, you're focusing on the beneficiaries and maybe the funding stakeholders, and you don't necessarily have customers because you're not intending to sell anything or make a revenue in that way. So it's possible to use this without it necessarily being commercialized. But once you've done it for an innovation, if you then see an opportunity to commercialize it, to make income, to sustain the organization, you can convert it into the social business model. Which is helpful. If you flip to the next slide, Karen, this is where it gets chaotic. You can see it filled in here. If you go to the business model canvas, you'll see, this was a group of students who were interested in supporting first generation low income students, and they felt that the beneficiaries needed a mentoring service. They needed a 24/7 helpline. They needed a drop-in center so that they could get to know one another, build community, all of that kind of thing. So those were the social programs that they were developing. In terms of the business, they felt that the catering services on campus weren't really catering to the needs of those students or their tastes specifically. And so they decided they'd set up a cafe and that they would actually bake their own product. So they called the business the Need, Bake, Serve Cafe. And their social mission was to end financial insecurity for first-gen low-income U.S. college students. The map itself, you can see we have yellow Post-its, green Post-its, and pink Post-its. The yellow Post-its represent information the students know for a fact. The green is, we think we know this, we're not too sure. We've got a question mark beside it. And the pink Post-its are essentially a way for the students to say, what about this idea? Maybe we should think about this. Is this something we can explore more? So as they go through different iterations of the business model canvas, doing the research throughout the process, the next time they go to the canvas, the green Post-its become yellow, the pink Post-its become green, etc. And you can, as a professor, you can start to see their development of thought and change over time. So it's really helpful as a way to kind of monitor that. And, the wonderful thing about Mural is you can drop in logos, you can drop in links to other Google Docs. If the student has done some research, they can share those notes with their colleagues in the class or afterwards. And so it's really helpful in seeing this development again to make sure that they're moving towards their learning goals when it comes to the business model canvas. So
I have a quick question for you before we move on to Michael, okay? And that is, when you're doing this looks very comprehensive. You have multiple hands and eyes on it. What point of the semester do you introduce it? And how long are they working on it?
Mm-hmm. So that's great. So I usually do maybe 2 or 3 classes in a semester just of talking about the point of view, wicked problem. What are the, I do an intro exercise with the students called Finding Your Inner Social Entrepreneur that asks them to reflect on the people that have influenced them most in their life, their past context, skills and experiences that they think they have, passions that they have. And we also talk about the issues that they've seen or heard or read about that has really made them stop and think something needs to change about that. So we actually talk a lot about the context in which they're trying to do this work. And from that, then I asked them to do a lot of research about, well, who else is working in this space? What are their solutions? We do a problem tree analysis. Then they, having done the inner social entrepreneur exercise, kind of drill down into whatever what they think they can bring themselves personally to this wicked problem. And then we begin the social business model canvas. And we'll probably practice it first on sort of a non-contentious issue, and just let them sort of get a feel for how the mechanism works itself. One of the biggest learnings at that point is when you fill something in one part of the box, you have to really be careful about how it has then impacted, the decision has impacted the other parts of the box, and make sure you keep, excuse me, changing and evolving that. So we do that, and then we kind of move to, okay, right, let's talk about the problem. And let's give this another go, and we'll keep working on it then for the rest of the semester, essentially. So yeah, just to my last slide there, I said I was from Northern Ireland, and this is just a shout out to my hometown. I'm actually from Derry in Northern Ireland. If anyone's caught the Netflix series Derry Girls, I am a Derry girl. So there we go. Yeah.
Great.
Michael, you're on mute.
I am still, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think we're just gonna get into medias res, right? So I'll just take over, and thank you for this interesting sort of like pragmatic approach. What I'm gonna do with humanistic leadership is, I guess, zoom out a little bit to the change level or lever that Donna Meadows calls the mindset shift. So that's what we're talking about, and I'm representing the Humanistic Leadership Academy. We all know that we have manifold challenges, and so those challenges can't be addressed with the same mindset that created them, as Albert Einstein said. And if you want to move the slide deck forward, I appreciate it. So we do need different leadership. I think that's what we're talking about here as well. What I also think is interesting to see is that this is now a mainstream conversation. And maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, many of us talking about social innovation, other things sort of like that was sort of a great marginal conversation. And now this is central. And that's a great thing. At the same time, I do think we have to answer a couple of basic questions for that to be meaningful. Otherwise, it becomes sort of almost ridiculous. And greenwashing, ESG washing, everybody says they do it, and in the end, nothing shifts. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. My proposal here is really like with the Humanistic Management or Humanistic Leadership Academy and that framework, to switch the foundational mindset from one that is seeing responsibility and the responsibility of managers and innovators, anybody, social innovators, any other innovator, to actually produce more. And that model is so ingrained in us that even in the social innovation conversations, oftentimes when we say success and impact, it's more of something. And it's not always the case, but especially those kind of models lead us to almost replicate the mindset that we call economistic, which assumes that quantity is going to help us solve issues. And if the quantity is manifested in kind of impact goals, then we'll solve issues that are deeper. Sometimes they could, and I think that there is some also relevant pause needed. And we call an alternative model the humanistic model, and you see them like playfully represented as the bagel and the triangular sandwich. And many of you probably are familiar with Kate Rayworth's work on donut economics. And we're sort of shamelessly borrowing from her in terms of manifesting what we think are the core differences between the dominant model and the model that we call humanistic, where we say there are fundamental dignity and social needs of all people, and that there are planetary boundaries. And within those, you can operate and you can innovate. And whether you call it social innovation or you can call it some other innovation, if it creates something that allows people to stay in a safe and just zone for humanity, that's going to be creating a world that works for everybody. Whereas if we're in a model where just growth in terms of more is dominant, we may end up with something that's better in terms of social context, but it may also just perpetuate the existing dominant model of more is better. So you're going to go to the next one. There are basic foundational assumptions that we need to, as educators, also unpack. And they're much harder to unpack, because we are oftentimes not even aware of those constraints that are provided by our deep-rooted core assumptions. And when I say the core assumptions, I think everybody here probably is familiar with the model of Homo economicus. Homo economicus is the model that legitimizes social sciences. And we have to be clear about that. And I think in many conversations intellectually, we're not addressing this beast. And in many ways, social innovation and social entrepreneurship can become a wolf in sheep's clothing, where it's like, oh, okay, well, we're also doing good stuff. And yeah, the model of capitalism or whatever it may be is also helping us to advance society in many meaningful ways. And for sure, it could be. But if we take on the real scientific insights about who we are, I think we go even deeper and we find maybe a more valuable understanding of who we are as people. And that means also what we need to address by innovation or social innovation. And so very quickly, the difference between Homo economicus and Homo sapiens, according to evolutionary biology, and I have 30 seconds to give you that insight, is that yes, as Homo sapiens, we have developed 4 independent drives, whereas Homo economicus only has 1. And for him, the drive that is to be met is the drive to acquire. Homo sapiens, and the research says, and I'm quoting mostly Paul Lawrence of Harvard Business School, has a drive to acquire for sure, but it also has independent additional drives that allowed us to survive. And one is the drive to defend that which we acquire. And that explains the need for psychological safety, but also physical safety, which is not accounted for in a model of typical Homo economicus. But then even more so, the drive to bond, that which makes us social. We are fundamentally social beings, and any kind of innovation ultimately that serves us and helps us flourish is contributing to some kind of sociality. We have developed that way as a species, and it's basically Homo erectus, the prior species before Homo sapiens, that became social and tribal. And this is well documented in all kinds of sociobiological literature. I'm not going to be able to go more into that, but I just want to point that out. Our sociality and social innovation is not a bug. It's a feature in terms of allowing human beings to survive and thrive. And we have, in terms of adopting Homo economicus, relegated our social nature to the margins. And that's been problematic. And that's why we are where we are. Now, the other additional point, which is interesting, is that as Homo sapiens, we've developed more cranial power, which makes us as a species think in the abstract, but also require sense making. It supports innovation, of course, but it also needs to make sense for us to innovate for something bigger. And if we are in a current context, just innovating for more growth, more money, more GDP, more profitability, or even more impact, it's just not clear whether this is something that gives us sense as an overall question to how and why we should be alive. And so this meaning making is something that's fundamentally important to Homo sapiens, and it's fundamentally dismissed. And yes, it's something that social innovation addresses. But I just want to point out that this is not only social innovation that can address this, but any kind of management or leadership if we want to. So if we can go to the next slide. In the context of the biology, we call it these 4 drives, or the basic social needs. In the context of the humanities, we've called this principle dignity, and meaning basically that which makes people alive and thrive, the foundational principles of human rights agenda, or, and that was sort of formulated by Kant, anything that has intrinsic value, or as MasterCard's advertisement, which is one of the longest running advertisement campaign and most successful and globally understood campaigns, is showcasing that we all have a sense that there's something that's more important than money. And that's what we call dignity. And in terms of the humanistic leadership approach, we say we need to honor and protect the dignity of human beings, but all life in general. And when we do that, then we can innovate. Then we can innovate around that and contribute to flourishing. So maybe the next slide. So this is, of course, not pie in the sky. This is these practices that have been done. You probably know of Grayson Bakery or Sikkim or Ben & Jerry's or The Body Shop or Natura or Barry Waymiller, some of those companies that are featured quite a bit in the social innovation conversation. But increasingly, this is something that people from all kinds of walks of life are looking into: government, universities, et cetera, because this leadership practice is actually proven to be much better in terms of all kinds of results: human results, financial results, et cetera, et cetera. So with the Humanistic Leadership Academy, that's what we're focusing on: developing first that understanding, that knowing, but also the practices of it. But then more importantly, that which is oftentimes not addressed in education and pedagogy is the being dimension. How can you develop yourself as a professor? How can you develop the students in terms of the inner development goals? I believe that's what many people are calling it now, in terms of becoming the change maker and becoming the person that honors their own dignity, honors the dignity of others, and allows authentically and creates well-being with others around them. So with that, I think I can close. But yeah, that's just sort of a call, an invitation to join the Humanistic Leadership Academy or the work of the Humanistic Management Association. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And we'll be getting back to you on that IDGs in our discussion later. So now it's my platform. Hello, everybody. And I think that Michael also pointed out how important storytelling is to the learning process. So that's going to be my focus today. So I can go on to the next slide, Karen. So when you're telling a story, who are the characters involved and what is the context? That is principally what we start if we want to start in any place of empathy. So for today, we want to know about stories that connect youth, students, entrepreneurs, and leaders. So I've made this like little quick Excel file for you because while I was a university professor for over 22 years, my role when I have to reflect on it is really one of an ecosystem builder. So how do you do it when no one is thinking about social entrepreneurship, because it used to be a communist country and social is not a necessarily favored word. So you have to kind of build from scratch what you're doing. So what I can do is I can't tell you everything, but I can show you a few ways in which we reached out and taught storytelling to these different markets. So you can go to the next slide, Karen. So visuals absolutely unlock the storytelling potential. And I have resources because my key thing is I want to give you takeaways that you could use and put into practice right away. So one of the first from the left side, you'll see there's a youth EU project I was part of. And this is touching young people in various different socioeconomic backgrounds and engaging them in co-working spaces and community organizations to come up with social entrepreneurship ideas. And we brought and convened all these young people together in Turin, Italy, and we gave them many different challenges. One of the challenges we did was to make a paper doll. And they cut out a paper doll and they put what rules their head, what rules their heart, what are they doing with their hands, and where are they going with their feet, so that we could understand them in their current context. And then everybody could have discussions in a room full of strangers and immediately start telling stories where they started to develop shared meaning, as Michael pointed out. The next one was the students in the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. And sometimes students get very jaded, you know, oh, another plan, another idea, we don't see where it's going. So in the context of this, we factored in a leading culture icon, which is IBM, and we brought the students out. So they had to show what they did in the semester. And as you see, we decorated the walls. This was learning and development for IBM, and at the same time, a showcase of the students' work and the social entrepreneurs and innovators that they had discussed all semester. The next one, moving on, is the entrepreneurs at a hackathon. As you know, they have to use pitching tools in a very short window from 3 to 7 to 20 minutes. They have to convey a message of an idea that they want to realize. So you see this little boy in the picture. That happens to be my son. He's now 20, but I can tell you in this picture, he was just 12, and he was always telling people to get a job this experience, what it was like pitching ideas at a hackathon. The last one that you can see here is the storyboard. And this is how leaders can unlock some of their frustrations. I know that Rosemary will get into which SDG are we talking about here, which is number 4. But when you talk about leaders in the context, what is fair work these days? What if you're doing work that is under pressure and you're throwing off your work-life balance? This little sketch is showing a leader crying out for help. Understand me. If you want me to create behind a computer, you got to give me a break and some points to relax. So it's telling and sharing stories that's super important. Now I'll go through in the next ones, and you'll have to tell me how I'm doing on timing. So I have a few little cheat sheets for you. So how do we crisply and concisely tell our stories? Well, at one of these workshops I did, I used the story changemaker canvas. It's a really great, it can walk you through what was your past. And as Denise pointed out before, getting students to find their inner social entrepreneur is really key. So telling their story from their past to the present to the future they imagine. And the next one, I think Shonen's using my strategy pop up on slide, and Tina will know she needs to move on. And so one of the takeaways you could do is an SDG 1 slide assignment. So it could also be purged, put on the wall, and everybody can see it. You can see this one was from 2016, but if you make it, it will absolutely be sticky. So we have this example of, a shitty social entrepreneur, literally, because she's dealing with sanitation. So sometimes social entrepreneurs will go to the ugliest parts of the issue and just deal with it. So this is one example. And the next. So the other one is to play games. You have the pitch. How do you come up with your pitch? You can use things like a startup Mad Libs, which lets you fill in the blanks. And the only thing to make it social is to a call to action like Michael did at the end, join his Humanistic Leadership Academy. Next. And quickly, to do a storyboard, you can go to the next. You choose your theme, you break it down into boxes. I often start with a blank white paper. You can move to the next. I'm going very fast now. And then you'll see what the end results will be. And I did a pre-drawing, you can go to the next one, of sketches of every one of the speakers. So at the end, you'll get a summary of storyboarding this actual seminar. Next. And if you don't have the skill set, you can always use photos and text to make your storyboards. So don't be panicky. And the last thing, which you probably didn't notice, is that every heading was made of 6 words. And this is a really great trick. I know that Denise used it. She said, get Burmese farmers out of poverty. She used already the 6-word story. So last slide. Yes. So check it out. And if you want any other tips, please be in touch with me and I'll be glad to show you. And next up, we have our dear Rosemary. Rosemary, are you ready? Debbie, do you know if she's having any technical issues?
Yeah, so Rosemary, make sure you unmute.
Okay,
And there you go. Thank you, dear.
thank you. Yes. Yeah, we're looking at the social aspect, and the whole idea on have we gotten it right as the education institution also, or are we doing it the wrong way? Are we addressing the problem? Because we are seeing many, especially within Kenya and within Africa, goal 4 that was agreed that by 2030 or 22, that's supposed to be equitable education. And equitable education means that we need to address the 10 targets and 11 indicators. And how is the actually the institution addressing this? And this is what I want us to look into as we look at the social aspect of the education. We've gotten right, and the government actually aligning their policy or aligning also their decision and also other stakeholders in line with these stakeholders' commitments. How are they going to build and upgrade, especially what the previous speakers have spoken about the social aspect of education? You're finding that innovation is becoming key. You're finding that there's need to be to address what we call people have been marginalized, and people also who have also been raised in a violent environment. How is their issues going to be addressed? Education aspect of it. You're finding that the training of the teachers, do they take into consideration the new emerging trends that are now being adapted in a technological world we are speaking about next? So I'll start with this story of, it's called a journey story. And so that we can see how being a 15th born of a family of 17, she has got her dreams like any other child, young people within the region having finished their education. And her dream is to become one of the leaders and also become a community and participate and even make an impact in a community. She has also dreams to enjoy the benefits of a natural resource, especially in that region, because the natural resources are key thing. But she comes from a marginalized community and where the presence of government is so removed. And then the education, though free, she was forced to drop out of school because to take care of other siblings and the parents to walk also to a distance to look for food because of severe drought. And her sister, a Duke, 15 years old, soon gets married because of the region they come from. So Janice are worried that she might not actually get her dreams, no matter even if the education is free. And the probability of primary education is 17 times less than actual ordinary Kenyan, and how they are learning, and 4 times less than the probability of even having a secondary education, and 63 times. And so when we are looking at it from a social perspective, we are seeing, even though the decision is there that Goal 4 has been able to create, even the government is giving free education, but because of the cultural and because of the region and because of where she's come from, she might not achieve it. So what can we do to make sure that a James' dream is achieved? Next. So this is where we look at, and I'm so grateful for Catalyst 2030 in their report of how do we transform, the education. We need to look at how can people flourish, societies and the planet, and how can and actualize the SDG, the goal, the target 4.5. That means that by 2030, to ensure that all learners acquires the knowledge and skills that are needed to promote sustainable development. So if we don't do this, then we are not going to expand the concept of education. It's going to still be a dream for Rajem. And then collaborating with the community so that we can be able to understand how can we also learn from the community knowledge and aspect, and how can we be able also to work with the community to innovate some of the pedagogies that are needed, especially when we want to implement the education. But unfortunately, sometimes we leave the community out of this. We leave even stakeholders out of it. We just come as stakeholders, we want policymakers, and this is what has been decided that we have to achieve. So we leave many people in the decision we make. Next. Next. So when we look at education, yes, when you look at the future of work, and we look at even the agenda story, we need to shift as the academia, how we are going to actually carry our education. And the universities, we need to start rethinking, how do we address the knowledge gaps that's existing, like even getting the knowledge from community in order to innovate education opportunities, like for someone like a gem. And also, how can we be able to engage? And we're seeing that the pedagogy of the kind of education that is needed is to engage the students to be able to also be part of the thinking, be part of the ideas, and be part of the innovation and progressive. So it's not like you are teaching at them, you are teaching together with the students to be able to get the impact of the education. And I'll give you an example of how we've done it here at Strathmore. And the approach also here is how then does individual learners speed up in ensuring, because sometimes we can take, students can be slow in class, but they're experts. They're actually innovative, but we don't learn from them. We don't even give them idea to even share their ideas. So how do we make sure that they participate equally? And also prevent students from feeling like they're overwhelmed and by held back, and also methods of fostering deeper understanding on how to actually, on the subject matter. Because sometimes you say, oh, you are not good at science, you are not good at technology, you are not good at this, then you kind of cut them out. But sometimes they're not good at it, but they'll be able to actually give you an idea on what is matters for you as a lecturer or as a teacher. Next. So the reason why I was faster, because I want us to say, as Strathmore, we've realized that with the emerging technology, with the emerging new ideas, we are realizing that there are quite a number of people who have been left out. So we have developed what we call customized classes, that we go and find out what are the needs in the market. And this has seen us actually come up with the gig economy aspect of it. It was usually called Juakali. But now the gig economy, when we did research, we found that the gig economy actually contributes almost 40% of the country GDPs. And now it's started becoming a terminology that's being used. So what we call Juakali, the people that are doing what we call informal business, now the government is paying attention because it's adding into the economy and they're adding into understanding. That's why now entrepreneurship now becoming a key thing, because entrepreneurship now is building on the gig economy. And so, but these people would not have gone to school. So we are trying to give them what we call a customized class for them to be able to be recognized, certified, and also understand that they can actually be inclusive and be part of the economic building. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'd also invite Michael, if you could turn on your camera too, so we can have everybody up and seen. And if there's anybody in the audience who would like to ask any questions, any follow-up questions, please feel free to do so. And I know that Denise went first. So maybe Denise, you have a burning question for any of us that we were talking about, that we discussed.
A question, or I guess an observation, which is just how interlocked all of our methodologies are and our perspectives are. We have a common goal and theme. And our approaches, you'd mentioned, Tina, how, you do the pre-work and the storytelling. Michael also talks about humanistic design. I need all of that for, I need students to be able to do all of that, to be able to have a good outcome when they then apply it to a social business model canvas. So I don't really have a question right now. I'll let everybody else ask questions, but that was just a really striking observation that I had in the session. Thank you all so much for sharing it.
Okay, great. And I think that I will then pick up on something that Rosemary said and pose it to everyone, okay? So when Rosemary, I don't know if it was a slide that you showed or a slide that was hidden, but I think it was really important for all of us to be aware of. So higher education is in competition or co-petition, is that the right word, Denise? With other learning mediums, and Rosemary, as her example with Eugene, is very clear that the model, whether it's free or paid, it's got to suit and fit the youth, wherever they are globally, right? So, and we know that some social entrepreneurs might not have gone to business school, right? And so their backgrounds, they still need to access the learning. So Rosemary said, what's going to happen in the future of learning? The before they get into college, the during that they're in college, and the after. What are going to be these innovative models that, as Rosemary pointed out, school, we have a gap, and then we have work, whatever that work is, whether it's innovation or not. So how are we going to be filling this skills gap? Where's the innovation there? Michael? We have movement of Michael, but I don't know if that was also conveyed in verbal.
Sorry, I'm experiencing some background noise, so I was missing maybe the cue. I apologize.
Don't worry. You know what? I think, I don't know about you, but I love background noise. If you were here, you would know that I actually have some roosters crowing in the background. I think that would be interesting if you could pick it up. So don't worry about that, Michael. The cue is, you know, we have school, which is formal or informal, and we have the expectations of work. I don't know about you, but when I wanted to be a university professor, I didn't know that I would rebrand myself part of the way through as an L&D consultant, you know, as a learning and development consultant. I didn't know that that existed, right? So we are, as we're rapidly changing worlds, we are preparing students for, you know, new titles, new roles, new gaps, and we have to be very progressive. How do we do it fast enough? How do we do it collaboratively? What are you doing?
I can just share from my perspective is that, yes, the model for traditional business professors that are tenured or in the basically the core of the institution is you get a PhD and then you're done, right? And then you teach from the knowing perspective. And I found that limiting in my approach to teaching, and I never was formally trained in pedagogy at all. I sort of learned from people here and there. And I'm now going through a process where I need to develop my personal inner piece much more. So the being dimension. And I feel like I've, of course, then learned for the knowing and the doing in a different way. But it's a transition, and it's not easy, I think, for many of us that are then in a high power status, whatever position, to sort of go back to the grounds and then say, all right, I'm gonna start newly, and I have to learn from many people around me, and maybe what I know and what I did to qualify for this position isn't really qualifying any of my students, and being humble in that sense, and it really like defeating at some point. And so I do think there's a lot of that going on in that transition and that transformation process.
I love that point of the conundrum of, I actually, in my corporate setting, I had to hide that I was a PhD. It was a disadvantage in the workforce when I was working in corporate learning and development. So this is why I have it in front of my name, in front of you guys, because I feel comfortable that you will appreciate that I went through the process, but it was not appreciated. So but it doesn't mean I'm not humble, right? So how can we stay humble? How can we stay hungry? I can tell you, so many of my younger colleagues are always willing to school me. And that's a good thing. Just like students are always going to challenge us. Like Jean doesn't want free education. She wants it customized for her and her conditions. And we must understand these contexts so that she can come into being, as you said, Michael. Rosemary, anything to add?
Yes, I want to add two things. That the academia seems to be isolated from the practical world. And the practical world is always emerging. Now we are in the fifth revolution, and the academia during even the pandemic, and when even the whole idea of going online, the young people are the ones who actually invented these innovative ideas and came up, and even in our houses, it was the young people that could take the phone and start working on it. And we are saying, are we going to have credit approach to some of the learning cases on this innovative? Do we give the youth a chance even to give ideas where professors are? And when we say that, which theory is based on, we already isolate them. So, and the future of world will not be in theory, will be in practicality and solutions. And how do we make the solution become practical for the youth? So we are seeing even here in Kenya that an engineer will be selling tomatoes, will be doing agribusiness, and also a doctor will be doing, because of where the job opportunity and innovation came in. And so they said, yeah, I'm interested in this and I'm doing it. So you find that it's not what they train that they're working on, but where the opportunity are. And the future of work actually will reshape how we can be able to address this.
Okay, well, I think that one of the things I would take away from that is the neurodiversity is really critical, you know, and I love that this radical way of what you are skilled at and what you do may diverge, and that's where the innovation will come. You know, it's exciting to have an engineer in agro, right? So there's so many interesting stories that happened in your past are happening in your present that are creating that future, and no one could imagine how unique everybody is, you know, and how all of those things shape us, and how do we strategically use them. So Denise, would you like to add anything? I see your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. This is a really great question. And I wanted to just lift up what Maria asked in the chat also, because and she asks about how do we get students excited and determined to choose a social impact career when they finish college. It's a huge issue. It really resonated with me because I work in Swarthmore College, which is a liberal arts college, and historically, you know, liberal arts colleges and often faculty in general push against the professionalization of education. You know, you're there to do this. You come to college, you're there to learn. You're not meant to sort of be rigid in the kind of for-profit. And I still get that. We are still dealing with that. However, what I'm seeing is the change is coming from within the student base itself, and we are behind in terms of meeting their needs. You know, even though they understand that they have debt, I think the pandemic and the way that technology has evolved and developed is really empowering them to say, I want to live my life this way, and my work is part of how I live my life. And when, you know, social intentions are driving their sense of self, and how they contribute to the world and the responsibilities that they have for the world, they actually are baking them into everything that they do. Most of my debate right now with students is, you know, is it a commercial entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur? And they say, well, I don't care as long as I can do these social things that are important to me. What we need to do is encourage everybody else to catch up. We need the debt agencies to say, if you're going to do this kind of work, we'll support you. We'll give you better incentives. We need the policymakers to do the same. We as institutions and educators need to also say that this is a priority for us in the world, just as if we have campaigns with the other important aspects of the SDGs that we're looking at. You know, this supporting students to do this work in whatever ways and in whatever kind of ecosystem it requires is our responsibility. So that's what I wanted to add. And thank you, Maria, for asking that question.
I don't know if I'm missing any other questions. I will scroll down into the chat, but feel free to just take one. Oh, we have tons of questions. What's going to be the innovations that fill the gap? Shonen was doing the recap there. Okay, and let's see. How do we get students excited? We answered that. How can early childhood development program benefit great systems in refugee settings, the most forgotten community when making policies and technologies? This is from Olivier.
I can actually do that. For the longest time, refugees has never been recognized as people. And like, for example, Kenya has hosted is a land of a big refugee camp, and many of the people born there either were born and grew up there. And they don't even have an identity card. So they don't even have what you call a kind of identification. So even if they train, they cannot get a job in Kenya. They are still stuck into the refugee camp. So many of them go outside the country. But because of the recently, during the online, find that like in Kakuma, there's a whole what we call a working hub in refugee camp, whereby the youth are now working online. The youth are now getting technical skills. The youth are now actually getting to understand the other world on how they need to engage. I did a paper actually, digitization of refugees, as a key resource for our country. And that actually we did a research with Kenya Red Cross, and it made the Kenya government actually start looking at the refugee camp differently and looking at even the business they do with that, camps, and also even how they can be able to use their skills in a very useful manner.
I think this brings up a really interesting conversation. When I would talk to students and also to my own children, it's about, are you just going to be a consumer or are you going to be a producer? It's how we frame things, right? And what you're saying, Rosemary, seems to also be like, are refugees a burden or are they an asset? And if we see all the migration patterns happening, forced displaced or chosen displacement, then we're seeing that refugees in fact can be and should be an asset. If you want to go to the yep.org website that was posted in the chat, you'll see that they were doing a refugee entrepreneurship model, and perhaps the different universities can reach out to the refugee communities since we have migration all over the place. So that could be just an idea to look at models that already exist. And there's great prison entrepreneurship programs as well, giving overlooked people a second chance. That it's all over the place, great models. So Debbie, how are we doing? We just want to do a check-in with you.
Yes, we're doing great. We would love to do breakout rooms. It's kind of the mantra of what we do is everyone likes to discuss their ideas and what they're working on. So what we're going to do here is the breakout rooms are going to open. Your question is very simple. We want you to share your best teaching practices. So is it an exercise or an activity that you do in the classroom that you love? You'll introduce yourself, but you have to do it super quick, name and university or social venture that you run, and then add in any activities or engagement that you'd like to see. We'll come back after that breakout room, share a couple of those. We're actually putting them into a document that so everyone can crowdsource and share with each other. And then we'll finish up the panel discussion or the Q&A there. So if everyone's good with that, we're going to put you into breakout rooms now. And thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the discussion so far. You should see the join button right now. Just opening it up from the discussions that you all had. If you want to share anything, I'm first going to share in the chat. We got on the discussion about jobs and students wanting jobs. And there is a LinkedIn group with over 5,000 people. Samira Khan from Microsoft does it, and it's social impact and sustainability careers. It's fantastic. Go online and get that. And we'll add that to the document as well. Anything come out of your room? Lubna, Nadia, you want to share?
We talked about empowering women entrepreneurship and cross-border collaborations. Around fortifying the capacity of women to work together across boundaries. We talked about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the disabled community, and how we are engaging the disabled, in catering to, and that's one of the things I had wanted to ask before we even went to the breakouts is, it's often they have unique challenges and
Good.
I don't.
Tina, unmute, Tina.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about abilities, right? Different abilities is that sometimes when people have a certain focus, that is an advantage. So Yeah, so people with autism have extreme amounts of energy and patience and enthusiasm for very specific interests, which makes them already know what they want to be good at. And then they become extremely prolific at that particular area. And then that makes them ripe to be an entrepreneur in that area. So that's one example.
And I know we got 1 minute left, and I love this discussion and could stay on forever. I just want to thank our speakers again and Tina for moderating. Wonderful session. I love the discussions in the breakout rooms. We do ask you to fill out this survey real quickly. We use it to kind of prove back the impact of our series that we do offer through our different learning series. So it should show up on your screen. Let me know if that's not the case and fill that out real quickly. The last thing we're going to put in the chat as well is we do have a building technology and capability workshop that is happening on Thursday. If you attend the General Assembly for Catalyst 2030, we have both Microsoft and TechSoup coming in and Moving Worlds talking about the amazing free resources for mainly nonprofits when it comes to TechSoup on technology resources, but your Zoom links, Microsoft Office, there's such great deals available. And there's also a social entrepreneurship program, a Microsoft Entrepreneurship Positive Impact training program that's available as well. So we'll put in the chat here the registration link for that event. And we would, again, like to thank our speakers. We'll include those in the meeting minutes in the video that we share with everyone. Unmute and say goodbye. Thank you again to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Nice meeting you all.
Thank you. Great session. Love the panel.
It was amazing.
Thank you.